When civilization feels too crowded, too connected, too overwhelming, some people choose to disappear. They pack their belongings, leave their old lives behind, and venture into the wilderness where cell towers can't reach them, where power lines end, and where the nearest neighbor might be 50 miles away. They call it going off-grid. But out there, beyond the safety net of modern society, beyond the reach of help, some discoveries are better left unmade. Tonight, I share with you 3 true accounts told by the survivors themselves. People who learned firsthand what can happen when you're truly, terrifyingly alone. My name is Marcus Holloway, and I used to be a software engineer in Seattle. Used to be, because I can't focus on code anymore. Not since what happened in those woods in northern Idaho. I bought 40 acres of dense woodland in March 2019. There was this old cabin on the property that hadn't seen a human soul in over 20 years. I thought it was perfect, complete isolation, just me and nature. God, I was so stupid. I spent 3 months fixing that place up. Solar panels, rainwater collection, the works. The nearest town was 40 minutes down this winding dirt road that turned into a muddy nightmare when it rained. But I loved it. At least, I thought I did. It was my 4th night in the fully renovated cabin. I was reading by candlelight, trying to disconnect from technology, you know? That's when I heard them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling my cabin. I grabbed my flashlight and burst outside, heart hammering in my chest. Hello? Who's there? I called out, but there was nothing. No footprints in the soft earth around my cabin. No broken branches. Just nothing. The next morning, I found something that made my blood turn to ice. Carved into the bark of this massive pine tree, the one directly facing my front window, was this crude symbol, a circle with an X through it, and below it, tally marks. I counted them 3 times to be sure. 17. I tried to convince myself it was just an old hunting marker, something left by the previous owners. But that night, the footsteps came back. Only this time, they brought something with them, this low, rhythmic tapping against my cabin walls. I couldn't take it. I grabbed my hunting rifle and burst outside, shouting into the darkness like a madman. I know you're out there. Show yourself. The sound stopped immediately. But in the morning, in the morning there were 18 tally marks. Every night it was the same. Footsteps, tapping, and every morning, another mark on that tree. I set up trail cameras around my property, motion-activated ones with infrared. When I checked the footage, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the camera. The cameras caught something moving between the trees. This tall, impossibly thin figure that seemed to glide rather than walk. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. It cast no shadow. Even in the bright infrared light, there was no shadow. On the 23rd night, when the tally marks reached 39, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was walking around the property with a flashlight, trying to find any explanation for what was happening. That's when I found it. Hidden under decades of moss and fallen leaves was this metal plate embedded in the ground near the marked tree. When I brushed it clean, I could barely make out the inscription, "Here lies the watcher, may he never wake." That's when I understood. I had awakened something that was meant to stay buried. My renovation work, my presence on this land. I had disturbed something that should have been left alone. The footsteps grew bolder after that. The tapping became pounding. And that figure in my cameras? It started moving closer to my cabin each night. On the 40th night, I didn't just hear the sounds. I saw him. I was sitting by my window when I looked up, and there he was, this gaunt, pale figure standing motionless among the trees, staring directly at me with these hollow, black eye sockets. I packed my truck and fled that very night. Left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, equipment, everything. I've never been back. Later, I researched the property's history. In 1943, a hermit named Ezekiel Thorne was found dead on that exact spot. The sheriff's report said his body was emaciated, like he'd been prevented from leaving until starvation claimed him. The report also mentioned that they found 41 tally marks carved into a pine tree. I fled on the 40th night. I live in downtown Seattle now, but I still hear them sometimes. The footsteps. They circle my apartment building every night at 3 a.m. I'm Elena Rodriguez. I used to be an emergency dispatcher in Phoenix, but I had to leave. I had to get away from everything after what I did. So I bought this decommissioned fire lookout tower in western Montana in 2020. The tower sits on top of Mount Raven, and let me tell you, getting up there is no joke. 3 hours of hiking on this treacherous trail, and my nearest neighbor was 60 miles away. I thought the isolation would help me forget. I was wrong. I'd been living in that tower for 6 months when I decided to restore the old emergency radio system. I guess I missed a human connection. And the first night I got the radio working, I picked up the usual stuff: truckers, amateur radio operators, the occasional emergency call. But at 2:47 a.m., I heard something that made me question my own sanity. Tower 7? Tower 7, do you copy? This is base camp. We have a situation. My dispatcher training kicked in immediately. I grabbed the microphone. This is Tower 7. I copy you, base camp. What's your situation? The response made my blood run cold. Elena Rodriguez, we know you can hear us. We've been trying to reach you for months. They knew my name. I demanded to know who was transmitting, but all I got was static. I figured it was some sicko with a powerful radio setup playing pranks. But they came back the next night. Tower 7, we're coming for you. Elena, we know what you did in Phoenix. My heart stopped. In Phoenix, during my final months as a dispatcher, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake that I never told anyone about. Someone died because of my negligence, and I covered it up. I moved to Montana to escape that guilt. October 15th, 2019. Apartment fire on Camelback Road. You delayed the response by 8 minutes because you were on a personal call. Jessica Manning died because of those 8 minutes. I ripped the radio from the wall, my whole body shaking. But somehow, impossibly, the voice continued, now coming from the emergency radio built into the tower itself. You can't silence us. Elena, we're broadcasting from Tower 7. I realized they were claiming to be transmitting from my own location. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed to the very top of the tower, scanning the wilderness around me for any signs of other people. The mountains were empty, silent. I was completely alone. For a week, the transmissions continued every night. Each one revealed more about my past. Secrets I'd never share with anyone. Mistakes I'd buried deep. Lies I'd told to protect myself. Somehow, they knew everything about my life. But the 7th night, that's when it got really terrifying. Elena, look at your window. The south window. I was 60 feet above the ground, surrounded by nothing but wilderness. There was no way anyone could be at my south window. But when I turned to look, I saw a face press against a glass pane with hollow eyes, a mouth that moved perfectly in sync with the radio transmission. We told you we were coming. I screamed and fell backward, knocking over furniture as I scrambled away from the window. When I looked again, the face was gone, but the radio kept broadcasting. You can run. Elena, you can hide on your mountain. But Jessica is here with us now, and she wants to have a conversation. Then another voice joined in, younger, female, filled with accusation. Why did you let me die, Elena? Why was your personal call more important than my life? I broke down completely. I confessed everything to those voices. My negligence, my cover-up, my cowardice. I begged Jessica for forgiveness, sobbing into the radio microphone. Then silence. I spent the rest of that night huddled in the corner, watching every window. When dawn broke, I packed my things and hiked down that mountain as fast as my legs could carry me. I left all the radio equipment behind. 3 months later, hikers reported strange radio transmissions coming from the abandoned fire tower. When authorities investigated, they found my equipment still running, somehow powered by an unknown source. The radio was broadcasting a continuous loop of my confession, my admission of guilt in Jessica Manning's death. I heard it's still broadcasting to this day. I don't use electronic devices anymore. I can't, because sometimes late at night, I hear Jessica's voice coming through my television, my phone, even my microwave. She's still asking why I let her die. My name is David Chun, and I'm an environmental engineer. Before I built what I thought would be the perfect off-grid homestead in the Nevada desert, I spent my entire life savings on that place. Massive solar array, battery backup systems, state-of-the-art water reclamation. My compound was 40 miles from the nearest paved road, surrounded by nothing but sagebrush, sand, and endless sky. I thought I'd achieved complete self-sufficiency. I'd been living there for 8 months when I started noticing something strange in my power consumption data. Every night between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., my system showed this massive drain on the battery bank, like someone was drawing enormous amounts of electricity. I spent days checking everything, looking for shorts, faulty wiring, malfunctioning appliances. But everything looked normal. Still, every night, that same power drained during the exact same hour. On the 10th night, I decided to stay awake and monitor my systems directly. At exactly 3 a.m., my monitoring equipment showed a massive power surge. But I could see that every appliance and light in my compound was turned off. The power was going somewhere else. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to check the solar array. What I found, I still can't explain it. The solar panels were glowing, not reflecting moonlight, actually glowing with this eerie blue-white radiance. And the glow was pulsing in a rhythmic pattern, like a massive heartbeat. As I watched, the pulsing grew faster, more intense. The electrical humming became a roar, and then shapes began to emerge from behind the solar panels. Tall, thin figures dressed in what looked like old military uniforms. They moved with mechanical precision, walking between the panels like they were conducting some kind of inspection. I ducked behind my storage shed, heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Through the gap between buildings, I watched as more figures emerged, dozens of them, all moving in perfect synchronization. That's when I noticed something that nearly made me scream. These figures cast no shadows, despite the bright glow from the solar panels. And when they spoke to each other, their voices had this hollow, electronic quality. Energy collection proceeding as scheduled. Population 0. Area secured. I realized these things were using my solar insulation for something. They were harvesting my stored energy. But for what purpose? Perimeter breach detected. Civilian presence confirmed. They stopped moving and turned in perfect unison toward my hiding place. Their eyes glowed with the same blue-white radiance as the solar panels. Civilian must be relocated. Initiate containment protocol. I ran. I sprinted toward my compound as fast as I could. These things pursuing me with inhuman speed. Behind me, I could hear the electrical humming growing louder, more aggressive. I burst into my home and immediately checked my computer systems. What I found there will haunt me for the rest of my life. My internet connection was active. That should have been impossible in my remote location. But there it was, and it was uploading enormous amounts of data to an unknown server. Files, documents, photos, personal information. Everything on my computer was being transmitted somewhere. But here's the worst part. The upload history showed this had been happening every single night for 8 months, ever since I had moved to the property. David Chun, please open the door. Relocation is mandatory. I grabbed my emergency supplies and fled through the back exit. As I drove away in my Jeep, I watched in my rearview mirror as my entire solar array erupted in blinding light. I drove straight to the FBI field office in Las Vegas. When I told my story, they were skeptical at first, until they ran a background check on my property. Turns out my 40 acres sat directly on top of a classified military testing site from the 1960s, a facility where the government conducted experiments in electronic warfare and communication interception. The site was officially decommissioned in 1967 after a catastrophic accident that killed 17 personnel. Their bodies were never recovered. When FBI agents investigated my compound 3 days later, they found the solar panels completely drained and covered in this strange metallic residue. The computer systems showed no signs of the uploads I'd witnessed. But buried beneath my main solar array, they discovered the remains of 17 military personnel. Their bodies were somehow preserved in perfect condition, despite being buried for over 50 years. Each skeleton wore a small electronic device attached to the skull, primitive prototypes of neural interface technology that was decades ahead of its time. I never went back to Nevada. I moved to a small apartment in Los Angeles, thinking I'd be safe in the heart of the city. But last week, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My apartment electrical meter is showing the same mysterious power drain every night from 3 to 4 a.m. And yesterday, my landlord mentioned something interesting. This building was constructed in 1967 on land that used to be owned by the federal government. I think they followed me here. 3 survivors. 3 people who thought they could escape civilization, only to discover that some things follow you no matter how far you run. And some things were waiting for you all along. I still hear the footsteps. The voices never stop. They're still draining my power. You see, going off-grid doesn't always mean escaping. Sometimes it means walking directly into something that's been waiting in the darkness for decades. And sometimes the grid finds you anyway.